They tell us pleasure is the prize, but what if it is only a disguise? What if the chocolate, the scroll, the lust, the laugh are not joy at all, but camouflage for wounds we dare not face? Have you ever wondered when was the last time you felt whole without needing anything more? Not just amused, not just distracted, but truly untouched by craving. We live in an age drowning in pleasures yet starving for depth. Carl Jung once warned that the very comforts we chase are often the very things that keep us from healing. And today I want to show you why. Imagine this. You wake up and reach for your phone without knowing why. There is no emergency, no thrill, but habit pulls stronger than hunger. A post makes you smile for 3 seconds and then you forget. Another scroll, another laugh, until the day is gone but the ache remains. You put the phone down and grab something sweet, maybe salty, maybe both. Yet guilt creeps in because you were not hungry. You just needed something. And that something was not food, not dopamine. It was silence. It was escape. It was a pause from the storm you cannot name. Jung explained that every human carries a shadow, and pleasure, misused, becomes the shovel we use to bury it. When you eat not from hunger, when you scroll not from curiosity, when you desire not from love, you are not choosing joy, you are choosing anesthesia. Here lies the painful truth. Much of what we call pleasure is nothing more than relief from self-awareness. But the price is steep, because each counterfeit high deepens the hunger for something real. And when it does not come, you think you are broken. You are not. You are simply unaware that escape has been disguised as enjoyment. Let us go deeper. As a child you cried and no one came. You learned quickly that pain won you nothing. But when you smiled, when you performed, when you distracted yourself, people approved. That reward stuck. So you repeated it, until adulthood where your pain stayed silent but your pleasures grew loud. Louder than loneliness, louder than fear, louder than the child inside still waiting to be held. What few people realize is that pleasure has memory. Each time you use it to silence pain, your body learns to fear stillness. Stillness becomes unbearable. This is why silence feels like punishment, why you cannot sit alone, why you need noise even in the shower. Jung saw this clearly. Pleasure itself is not evil, but avoidance is. The problem is not the laughter or the chocolate. It is the denial they allow. Think of it as a desert. A traveler chases mirages believing the next one will be real. That is how we treat pleasure without purpose. But true nourishment is quieter. It expands you instead of numbing you. It is in a deep conversation, in finishing something you once feared, in realizing you no longer need what once controlled you. Nietzsche once said, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." Real pleasure is tied to meaning, not to numbing, and yet the false kind feels easier, faster, louder. That is why we reach for it even though it never feeds us. Let us rewind again. A child scrapes a knee and cries. Someone says, "Here, have a cookie," or "Stop crying, watch a cartoon." The message is quiet but permanent. Pain is weakness, feeling is punishment, and pleasure is the solution. So we grow fluent in distraction. We learn to translate every ache into consumption. Pleasure becomes our false language for pain. Jung once reminded us, when the inner world is ignored, the outer world becomes louder. Look around you. The scroll, the ping, the binge, they scream so you never have to listen. But listen to what? To the ache beneath, to the hunger for meaning, to the wound of being unseen. Pleasure is not evil. When chosen with intention, it is sacred. But when it replaces presence, it poisons. That guilt you feel after binging, after texting, after eating without hunger, is not proof of sin. It is the whisper of truth. It is the part of you that knows you were not fed. You only avoided the hunger. This is what shadow work truly means. Not becoming darker, not romanticizing pain, but facing the moments you betray yourself for relief and saying, "I choose truth over escape." Friedrich Nietzsche also warned, sometimes people don't want to hear the truth because they don't want their illusions destroyed. And pleasure is our most polished illusion. The question now is simple. Will you keep numbing the ache with quick fixes? Or will you meet yourself fully, bravely, without anesthesia? Before we can unlearn false pleasure, we must see where it began. Most of us did not choose distraction, we inherited it. It was taught to us long before we could name it. And the teachers were often the people who loved us most. Picture this. A child cries after falling down. The parent, unable to bear the sound, hands them a toy or a sweet. Not out of cruelty, but out of discomfort. The message is clear even if unspoken. Your pain is inconvenient, so here is something to distract you. Over time the lesson repeats. You cry, you are given sugar. You feel lonely, you are given television. You feel anger, you are told to smile and be nice. The body learns something it will carry for decades. Pain is not safe to express, but distraction is rewarded. Carl Jung warned us, neurosis is always a substitute for legitimate suffering. Instead of learning to stay with our feelings, we learn to escape them. Instead of trusting our emotions, we were trained to trade them for approval. So when adulthood comes, we keep reaching for substitutes. Food, sex, screens, endless noise. Anything but the stillness of what is real. And here lies the tragedy. The child never disappeared. They are still inside you, waiting to be held, waiting to be seen. But instead of presence, you give them what you were given. More distraction, more noise, more quick fixes. Until one day you realize the ache has grown louder than the comfort. The childhood script of pleasure whispers in many forms. It tells you to smile when you want to scream. It tells you to stay silent when your voice trembles to speak. It tells you to laugh at jokes that cut you. Because somewhere deep inside you learned survival meant staying likable. But likability is not safety. Compliance is not love. And endurance is not healing. The child inside knows this. That is why they keep pulling on your sleeve through exhaustion, anxiety, and loneliness. They are not trying to ruin your life. They are trying to remind you that you still have one. Think of the habits you hate most in yourself. The binge, the scroll, the silence. They are not flaws. They are signals. They are the echoes of a child saying, "Notice me, stay with me, do not turn away again." This is why it feels impossible to stop certain patterns. Because you are not fighting an adult habit. You are fighting a childhood script that believes distraction equals survival. You are not weak. You are rehearsing the only play you were ever given. Nietzsche once observed, "In every real man a child is hidden that wants to play." But for many of us, that child was never allowed to play freely. They were told to perform, to behave, to entertain, to be quiet. And now, as adults, we confuse performance with pleasure. We confuse appeasement with intimacy. We confuse relief with joy. The wound is not in the craving itself. The wound is in the silence that trained you to crave. When your feelings were dismissed, you learned to dismiss them too. And once you abandon your inner world, the outer world takes over. Noise becomes home. Numbing becomes language. Distraction becomes your comfort zone. Jung's wisdom returns here again. He said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." Terrifying because it means you must stop running. It means you must sit with the very pain you have spent a lifetime escaping. It means you must look at the child you once were and admit they deserve better. But this terror is also liberation. Because once you stop avoiding the ache, it softens. Once you turn toward the child within, they no longer need to scream through addiction or exhaustion. They only needed to be acknowledged. The script can be rewritten. But rewriting does not happen through more pleasure, more distraction, more running. It happens in stillness. It happens in honest conversations. It happens when you choose presence over performance. When you allow tears instead of hiding them. When you admit loneliness instead of covering it with noise. The childhood script of pleasure does not have to define your adulthood. It was given to you, but it does not belong to you. It is borrowed language, not your native tongue. Your true language is presence. Your true nourishment is truth. And once you begin to speak that language again, something shifts. Pleasure no longer feels hollow. Silence no longer feels unbearable. And life, for the first time, feels like it belongs to you. If distraction only failed us once, we would walk away. But the reason we return is because it works, at least for a moment. It silences the ache. It soothes the tension. It gives the illusion of control when life feels unmanageable. The problem is that every relief is temporary. The silence lasts minutes. The sweetness fades. The scroll ends in exhaustion. And what remains is emptiness, even louder than before. Carl Jung once explained, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul." This is the essence of numbing. It is not laziness. It is not weakness. It is survival. But survival becomes prison when we confuse relief with freedom. The cycle begins innocently. A stress at work, a fight at home, a restless night. You reach for something to take the edge off. And it works. The pain dulls. The anxiety quiets. The loneliness fades. So your nervous system learns. This is safety. This is what keeps me alive. But safety bought in this way is counterfeit. Because once the effect fades, the original wound is still there. And now it carries the shame of having been ignored. So you crave again. You consume again. You avoid again. And the cycle deepens. It is not pleasure you are addicted to. It is absence of pain. It is not joy you crave. It is numbness. You are not running towards something real. You are running away from something unspoken. Nietzsche once said, "The thought of suicide is a great consolation. By means of it one gets through many a dark night." He did not glorify despair, but he revealed how humans cling to anything that dulls unbearable pain. In the same way, distraction becomes our micro-death. A tiny pause from life that feels too heavy. A rehearsal for absence disguised as entertainment. The cycle of numbing is clever. Because each time it saves you from unbearable discomfort, it convinces you it is your friend. It becomes ritual. Morning coffee not for joy, but to mask exhaustion. Evening drink not for taste, but to bury the day. Scrolling not for learning, but to drown the silence that reveals loneliness. The ritual feels safe because it is familiar. But familiar is not the same as healing. Jung reminded us that the unconscious seeks repetition. It returns again and again to the same wounds until they are faced. So every time you numb, you delay the confrontation your soul demands. And the cycle grows tighter, more frequent, more automatic, until it feels less like choice and more like fate. But here is the secret. The cycle is not fueled by craving. It is fueled by avoidance. What you avoid gains power. What you face loses grip. Each time you numb, you reinforce the lie that you cannot handle reality. But each time you stay present, even for a minute, you weaken the cycle's hold. Think of it like a storm. If you always run indoors, the storm remains terrifying. But the moment you stand under the rain and realize you can survive it, the storm loses some of its fear. The same is true with your emotions. They are not hurricanes designed to destroy you. They are weather systems moving through, asking only to be felt. The cycle of numbing convinces you that silence will kill you. But silence is not the enemy. Silence is the medicine. Silence is where you hear the part of yourself you have buried. Silence is where the wound stops screaming and begins whispering. Nietzsche also wrote, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." When you lack a why, every discomfort feels unbearable. So you run. So you numb. But when you anchor to a why, the pain does not vanish, yet it becomes survivable. The cycle weakens because presence has meaning, and meaning is stronger than escape. The truth is, you cannot numb selectively. When you mute sorrow, you also mute joy. When you bury fear, you bury aliveness. When you deny grief, you deny love. The price of escape is not only pain avoided, it is life avoided. Breaking the cycle begins with a radical choice. not to banish pleasure but to redefine it, not to chase distraction but to seek nourishment, not to drown the silence but to listen to it, because silence, when entered honestly, no longer punishes, it heals. The cycle of numbing is strong, but it is not destiny. It is only repetition, and repetition can be rewritten. One moment of presence at a time, one breath of truth instead of avoidance, one act of listening instead of running. And with each moment you begin to prove to yourself, I can handle the storm, I can bear the silence, I can live without anesthetic. And slowly the cycle begins to break. Desire in its purest form is sacred. It is the spark that moves life forward. It is the pull toward connection, creation, discovery. Without desire there is no art, no intimacy, no progress. But when desire is hijacked by fear, it becomes shadow. The shadow of desire is not about wanting too much. It is about wanting for the wrong reasons. It is not hunger for nourishment, but craving for anesthesia. It is not longing for love, but addiction to validation. It is not passion, but performance. And while it looks like aliveness, it leaves us emptier than before. Carl Jung once wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Desire without awareness is exactly this. It drives you but not toward freedom. It drives you back into the same cycles of confusion and disappointment. And then you call it destiny when it was only avoidance dressed as longing. Think of the relationships that drained you most. Were they truly about love? Or were they about proving you were lovable? Think of the achievements you still boast about. Were they born of passion? Or were they trophies handed to silence the voice that whispered you were never enough? The shadow of desire thrives on emptiness. It whispers, if you achieve this, you will feel whole. If you earn their attention, you will feel safe. If you reach that number, that title, that body, you will finally belong. And sometimes you do feel whole, but only for a heartbeat. Because shadow desires feed the void instead of filling it. Nietzsche once observed, "Many are stubborn in pursuit of the path they have chosen, few in pursuit of the goal." Shadow desire makes us stubborn about chasing the object, but blind to the real hunger beneath it. We chase the partner, the applause, the possession. But what we truly crave is something quieter. Safety, presence, a sense of being seen. Desire itself is not the enemy, but when it becomes a mask, it is dangerous, because the mask is convincing. It looks like love, but it is performance. It looks like confidence, but it is compensation. It looks like joy, but it is anesthesia. And when the mask cracks, the shame rushes in. You ask yourself, why do I always end up empty? Why do I always repeat the same story? Why do I never feel satisfied? The answer is painful but clear. Because you were feeding shadow, not self. The shadow of desire shows up in subtle ways. The compliment that feels like oxygen because you cannot breathe without it. The purchase that excites for a day but leaves you hollow tomorrow. The sexual encounter that leaves you lonelier than before. The achievement that no one remembers but you cling to as proof you matter. And each time the script repeats, the high fades, the ache returns, the cycle deepens. And you confuse emptiness with failure instead of recognizing it as misdirected longing. Jung also taught, the meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. But shadow desire does not transform. It consumes. It extracts instead of exchanges. It drains instead of deepens. It does not allow intimacy, it only imitates it. So how do we step out of the shadow? The first step is brutal honesty. Admitting that much of what we chase is not what we truly want. Admitting that some of our desires were scripted by fear, by silence, by childhood wounds. Admitting that love was sometimes a bargain and not a gift. The second step is listening beneath the craving. When you long for applause, maybe what you truly need is safety. When you chase validation, maybe what you crave is belonging. When you hunger for distraction, maybe what you need is rest. Shadow desires dissolve when the true hunger is named. The third step is integration. Desire cannot be killed, nor should it be. It must be purified, brought back into alignment with truth. When you desire from presence, it nourishes. When you desire from shadow, it numbs. The difference is not in what you want, but why. Nietzsche once said, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." When your why is clear, desire becomes holy. When your why is buried, desire becomes shadow. And the work of healing is uncovering that why again. Desire in its shadow will always leave you restless. But desire in its truth will always bring peace. Because real longing is not about filling a void. It is about expanding your life into something more alive, more whole, more real. The shadow of desire has fooled you long enough. It has promised joy but delivered emptiness. It has promised love but delivered dependence. It has promised safety but delivered silence. And now you have the choice to see through it, to choose presence over performance, to choose nourishment over numbness, to choose truth over illusion. This is not the end of desire. It is the beginning of its redemption. Illusions survive because we rarely question them. They survive because they are comfortable, not because they are true. And the illusion of pleasure is one of the most seductive of all. It promises safety, connection, relief, yet it delivers only repetition and emptiness. Carl Jung once said, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls." This is why illusions are powerful. They give us just enough comfort to keep us from turning inward. They whisper, "Stay asleep, the truth is too heavy." But the truth is never as heavy as the chains of avoidance. Breaking illusion begins with doubt. Not cynical doubt, but curious doubt. The kind that asks, why do I keep doing this? Why do I reach for the phone when I am lonely? Why do I chase achievement even when it exhausts me? Why do I smile when my chest is tight with grief? The question itself is the first crack in the illusion. Illusions are fragile once examined, because they rely on your silence, not your awareness. The moment you look closely, you notice the seams. The sugar rush fades in minutes. The applause is forgotten by those who gave it. The body that was supposed to make you lovable still feels lonely, and in that noticing, the illusion begins to unravel. But breaking the illusion is not comfortable. Feels like betrayal, because illusions raised you. They were your teachers when no one else could show you how to survive. To walk away from them feels like walking away from family, and in some ways it is, but survival is not the same as freedom. And safety bought through denial is not safety at all. Nietzsche once warned, sometimes people don't want to hear the truth because they don't want their illusions destroyed. The same is true within yourself. There will be a part of you that resists, that clings to the familiar anesthetic, that says just one more scroll, one more drink, one more performance. Because illusions are not only habits, they are identities. They are the costumes we wore for years, and taking them off leaves us exposed. Yet exposure is the beginning of freedom. Because once the mask falls, the skin beneath can finally breathe. Once the performance ends, the silence can finally speak. Once the illusion shatters, the truth can finally arrive. The process is messy. You will grieve your illusions. You will feel naked without them. You will long for their comfort, even knowing it was false. This grief is not failure. It is proof that you are letting go of something that once protected you. Jung also reminded us, the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. Breaking illusions forces you into this terror. Because without the mask, all that remains is you. The anger you denied, the grief you buried, the loneliness you dressed in noise. But it is only when you stand with these truths that freedom begins. Illusions collapse in presence. When you sit in silence and the craving rises, you do not run. When you feel the ache and you stay, you do not escape. When you notice the pattern and name it, you do not deny. Presence exposes illusion for what it is, an attempt to avoid yourself. The paradox is that once you stop avoiding, the craving loses power. The scroll becomes boring. The sugar loses its sweetness. The applause feels hollow. Because your body begins to crave something deeper. Connection, not distraction. Nourishment, not numbness. Truth, not illusion. Breaking the illusion is not about renouncing all pleasure. It is about reclaiming it. It is about separating joy from anesthesia, love from dependence, rest from avoidance. Because real pleasure expands life instead of shrinking it. Nietzsche also wrote, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." When your why becomes truth, illusions no longer seduce you. Because you recognize their promise was always counterfeit. And the ache they tried to silence is not a curse, but a compass, pointing you toward what is real. The illusion shatters the moment you stop asking, "How do I avoid this pain?" and begin asking, "What is this pain trying to teach me?" That is the shift from numbing to living, from avoidance to awareness, from illusion to freedom. Freedom is not the absence of desire. It is desire purified by truth. It is pleasure chosen with presence instead of fear. It is the ability to sit in silence without reaching for anesthesia. It is the strength to meet yourself fully without disguise. And once the illusion breaks, you can never fully return. The old distractions feel thin. The old comforts feel false. And even though the truth is heavier, it is yours. It anchors instead of numbs. It frees instead of binds. When illusions fall, there is a silence that feels both terrifying and sacred. The noise of distraction is gone, but what replaces it is not immediate bliss. It is emptiness, raw and unfiltered. And here lies the danger. If you do not learn to practice real joy, the emptiness will lure you back to false comforts. Carl Jung once wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." This is the heart of real joy. It is not found in escape, but in authenticity. Not in numbing, but in wholeness. Not in applause, but in the quiet dignity of being true to yourself. Real joy is not a burst of ecstasy. It is not a sugar rush, a quick laugh, or a fleeting distraction. It is deeper, steadier, quieter. It does not demand attention. It roots itself in meaning, in presence, in integrity. Think of the moments when you felt most alive. Was it during the binge, the scroll, the hollow approval? Or was it when you created something that mattered to you? When you sat in stillness and felt at peace in your own skin? When you connected with someone who saw you, not your mask? That is real joy. It expands instead of numbs. It nourishes instead of drains. It sustains instead of collapses. Nietzsche once said, "In every real man a child is hidden that wants to play." Real joy awakens that child again. Not the child who learned to hide behind distractions, but the child who once laughed without needing validation, who once created without fearing judgment, who once lived without apology. The practice of real joy begins in presence. It is choosing to taste your food instead of devour it. It is choosing to listen in a conversation instead of rehearsing your reply. It is choosing to breathe in silence instead of drowning in noise. Presence is not glamorous, but it is powerful, because it is the soil where joy grows. The second practice is gratitude, not the forced kind written in journals for performance, but the honest noticing of what is already here. The warmth of a cup in your hands, the relief of breath after tears, the quiet miracle of being alive despite everything. Gratitude is not denial of pain. It is recognition that even within pain, life still offers fragments of light. The third practice is creation. Joy multiplies when you create instead of consume. Write, sing, paint, build, cook, move. Not for applause, not for perfection, but because creation connects you to life itself. Each act of creation is a rebellion against numbness. It says, I am alive and I choose to express instead of escape. The fourth practice is connection. Not shallow approval, but real presence with another soul. The conversation where you admit the truth instead of playing the role. The silence you share without needing to fill it. The laughter that rises not from distraction but from recognition. Connection in this way is nourishment, not anesthesia. Jung reminded us again, wholeness is not achieved by cutting off a portion of the self, but by integration of the contraries. Joy comes from this integration. It does not demand that you erase your sorrow. It asks that you carry it alongside your gratitude. It does not require perfection. It asks only that you show up as you are. The practice of real joy is not easy, because numbness will always tempt you with its speed. False pleasure will always lure you with its volume. But real joy is worth the discipline, because it does not vanish when the high fades. It does not collapse when the noise ends. It stays, steadies, it anchors. Nietzsche also reminded us, he who has a why to live can bear almost any how. Real joy is your why. It is the quiet conviction that life is worth living even when pain persists. It is the steady pulse that carries you through storms without anesthesia. It is the reminder that being alive is not about escaping suffering, but about embracing meaning. The practice is daily. It is not a grand epiphany. It is not fireworks in the sky. It is choosing presence each morning. It is noticing gratitude each afternoon. It is creating or connecting each evening. It is living as if your life belongs to you again. And slowly, without realizing it, joy becomes your default. Not the counterfeit kind that numbs, but the real kind that nourishes. Not the fleeting illusion, but the steady truth. And once you taste it even briefly, you will know. This is what you were searching for beneath every distraction. This is what you were chasing beneath every illusion. Real joy is not rare. It is available here, in this breath, in this moment, in this choice. And the more you practice it, the less you crave escape, because presence itself becomes enough.